So your Chapter 8 online lecture will be on perception. So I think the first thing, or the trickiest thing about perception, is even understanding what it is. The book doesn't even give an explicit definition. It talks about the perception process, but it doesn't really explicitly talk about what perception is. So I provided my own working definition. Is our interpretation of information we received based on our understandings of the situation and our personal environment and background. So perception is how you interpret information that you are presented with, and how you interpret that information, how you perceive that information is influenced by your own personal environment and your own personal background. There are also, the book talks about several other things or several other aspects of your background or of the situation that will affect your perception of a situation or of a stimulus or of an object. So the first thing it talks about is internal physiological factors. So these are the 5 senses. So you have visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, and olfactory. But what they're talking about here is your perception compared to somebody else's is going to change if your internal physiological factor isn't the same as somebody else's. So the perfect example is gustatory, taste. I cannot stand the taste of olives. Olives are the grossest thing to me. So if you want to gross me out, mention olives. Or pickles. Pickles are even worse. But I know as soon as I said that there's at least one person who listens to this who goes, "What are you talking about? I love pickles. I love olives. You're crazy." Our perception of a jar of pickles is going to be different because my gustatory response, my taste to pickles is different than yours. Goes for the same for every single one of these other things. Olfactory. Smells. I'm very smell sensitive. They trigger migraines in me. So there are certain smells that I cannot handle that other people like. Perfect example, I can't wear perfume, but I know lots of other people who couldn't leave the house without putting on perfume. And so our sense of smell is different. Same thing goes for a sense of touch. Some people like stubble on a man's face, or maybe they like a soft or supple touch. Other people might like a bumpy. I don't know. So long as or I might feel something and think it's really rough, and you might feel something and think that it's not all that rough at all. Maybe it's even kind of smooth to you. But our senses of touch are different, so our perception of that object is different. Same thing goes for sight. I might look at a piece of artwork and think it's absolutely beautiful. You might look at it and think, all you see is somebody splashes some paint on a canvas and calls it art. And so our sights are different, and so it's going to affect our perception of that piece of art. Then there's some external physiological factors that affect our perception of things. So first is metabolism. Metabolism affects whether or not you feel you're hot or cold. So a perfect example of how perception changes based on that, my husband has a really fast metabolism, so I have a really fast metabolism, so I run hot. My husband has a slower metabolism, so he runs more cold. So at night, I always have a fan blowing on me to keep me cool enough to sleep, and he's always under a blanket because he's always cold. Or appearance. When you look at somebody, you might have different viewpoints of how you think they look, or whether or not you think that they look professional, or if they look well-kempt. Or what you consider to be a good height or a good weight. All of these things will affect it. So if you're talking to my cousin or my sister-in-law who's 5 feet, anything bigger than 5'6", she can't reach it. So that's high, that's tall for her. You talk to my brother, on the other hand, who's 6'1", not so bad. 5'8" is actually an easy thing for him to grab. Fatigue also affects your perception of things, how tired you are. If you are super, super, super tired, you haven't slept for 2 days, and there is a baby crying, you're going to have less patience with it than if you had just gotten done sleeping for 9 solid hours and now the baby's crying. You're probably going to have more patience. Same thing goes for hunger. If you are looking at a full, large Domino's pizza and you haven't eaten for 4 days, that pizza is going to look pretty flipping amazing, especially if it has your favorite toppings on it. You're probably going to eat half, if not the whole dang thing. But if you just got done doing a pizza eating contest and you ate 2 whole pizzas and now here's another large Domino's pizza in front of you, you're going to look at that pizza very differently. Same idea for overall health. If you are sick, you are going to perceive things differently, perceive tasks as more difficult than if you are overall healthy. Then the last few types of perception that the book talks about are psychological factors. So social situations. If you are hanging out with a bunch of people who really, really, really love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you're going to be able to talk, or you're going to perceive things, you're going to analyze the movie differently than if you're hanging out with people who have just seen the movies once and kind of just want to talk about what they saw. Those social situations are going to change the way you perceive, the way you look at the movies. Or lifestyle choices. So things that you do daily. So maybe you daily go for a run. So going for a run's not that big of a deal for you. But you talk to somebody who's never gone for a run in their life, and going for a run's going to be a big deal. Or lifestyle choice. Somebody who's used to eating at 5 o'clock every day and it's now 8 o'clock, they're going to be pretty hungry. But you have somebody who always eats at 9 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock, they're probably not going to be hungry. So any lifestyle choice that you make is going to have a different perception of something for somebody else who's made a different lifestyle choice. Same thing with cultural influences. If you are a Christian, Christmas is probably a pretty big deal to you. If you are not a Christian, Christmas may not be as big of a deal for you. Or if it is still a big deal, it's a big deal for a different reason. It's for a family connection versus a religious connection. Then the book goes on and ends with talking about the 3 steps. Oh, no, it doesn't end with. It just goes on to talk about the 3 steps to the perception process. So the first step to the perception process, similar to that in listening, is selection. So you're going to select what you want to pay attention to, what you're going to perceive. Then you're going to interpret what you've seen, heard, taste, felt, smelt, whatever. But you're going to interpret the information you've obtained from, so after you select it, you're going to interpret your selection. You're going to assign it meaning, you're going to assign it value, you're going to assign it good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no, what have you. And then in some way, you're going to move to step 3, which is you're going to react to your interpretation. So the decision that you made from what you've chosen, so what you've selected, and after you've selected something and interpreted it, you're going to react in some way, shape, or form. So somebody puts out a jar of olives. I choose to select that. I interpret it as olives are disgusting. So my reaction is I'm going to go, ugh, or push them away or say, no, thank you. So because my background is different than other people's background, we're going to have perceptual misunderstandings. So going back to that same jar of olives I just spoke about, if I was to say, ugh, gross, and shove them away, somebody might be offended or might be upset or just think I'm crazy because they love olives. So what you can do to decrease perceptual misunderstandings are follow some of these guidelines. So the first guideline is listen to the verbal and nonverbal communication being used. So if I scrunch up my face, have a disgusted look as I shove the olives away from me and go, ugh, you're probably not going to want to interpret that as, oh, she just hasn't tried olives. Maybe she secretly likes them. Because if somebody was to do that, that means that they weren't listening to the verbal and nonverbal communication I was showing. Step 2 is to think about, or the next thing to keep in mind is to think about the personal environment, culture, or family background of this person. So then maybe they'll ask me, well, why don't you like olives? And for me, I don't have a specific reason why I don't like olives, but I maybe do. Maybe I was forced to eat them as a kid and I always hated them. Or maybe I ate an olive pizza and got sick afterwards and I associate that with olives. But if you can think about, well, why would this person maybe not like olives? Or why would this person maybe not like this type of music? Then that will help you control your initial reactions. So anytime you can, instead of going, are you crazy? How do you not like olives? Instead you say, oh, well, I happen to enjoy olives. Is there a reason why you don't like them? Then that opens up. It doesn't make that first person feel judged or feel like something's wrong with them. Instead, it's opening up the dialogue for you to have that conversation. So I can say they're just too bitter for my taste. I can't handle the intensity of that flavor. And then if you go through those first 3 things, so you listen to the verbal and nonverbal, you think about their personal environment, culture, and family background, maybe even ask them about it. You control your initial reactions so you don't call them a crazy person when they don't agree with you. But instead you have a conversation, and in the end you still like olives and they still hate olives. There's nothing wrong with agreeing to disagree. I feel like if people agree to disagree more instead of trying to convince people of things, that when people are incredibly set in their ways to the point where they aren't budging, sometimes you just need to agree to disagree in order to avoid a conflict from arising. So those are the important ins and outs to know about perception. So make sure that you have your journals done for it, the discussion posts done for it, and that you are ready to go for our assignments for next week. Thank you all, and I will see you next Saturday.